Okie dokie. So, good morning. So, winding down the days, that we operate under the auspices, under the wings of salvation, before we move along to a new contemplation that we begin to associate with the time that each of one of these lessons are allowing us to spend with each other here, and with our Father and all living beings in the beingness of the totality of our reality through the time that we have afforded ourselves to gain a true perspective of who we are beyond the illusion of the bodies that we seem to be as we attempt to communicate here, and begin to recognize the reality that we share behind the illusion of space and time. And so we're learning through these new experiences that the power of our mind is being restored to us, and we are being entrusted once again with the trust of the Holy Spirit. We gain trust in ourselves. This is important. This has been an important theme for me throughout the maturation and integration of the experiences that I've had. I gain trust in myself as I learn to trust in the Holy Spirit and the guidance that I get from the guides that are given me and the guidance that are given to me from them when I say yes and allow situations to be made manifest wherein which I learn to utilize the guidance and see that I am trustworthy to that which is beyond space and time. And ultimately, that's my Father and all of my brothers. So I learn that I am trustworthy to them, and then I learn at the same time as I'm learning I'm trustworthy to myself. And in these experiences of being trustworthy that we share with all of reality, and whether or not it's seen in space and time, but within our hearts, these are the experiences that change us. And we know we're changed because we find ourselves in situations that we previously feel the vibratory frequency of energy of failure that we had of the past, wherein which we made the wrong mistakes. So we come up against situations where we feel the setup. And sometimes when you begin to recognize, this is good, so we're talking about the direct experiences that we have and sometimes when you really get familiar in your maturation with how this works, and you've been involved in so many situations, be they drastic or mundane, in your own evaluation of your awakening, which would always be wrong in that regard. Be they drastic or mundane, whenever you're given the ability to stop, whenever you give it yourself, whenever you afford yourself, because this is where you restore the power of your mind. We've reduced ourselves. We've reduced the use of the power of our mind. As sons of God, we've reduced the use of the power of our mind to thinking that we are these dream figures that must make decisions and relearn who we are through functioning right-mindedly and making correct and corrective decisions based on the experience that are brought to us through these lessons and the guidance that we get both from the inspiration of the Holy Spirit and the direct voices that many of you hear from He who is your guide. And many of you, that's Jesus. Many of you have the ability to use Ramana Maharshi. Some of you there are other guides. But when you begin to recognize, because we have as human beings, we've introduced what they call levels, integrals, dimensions into the experience. Okay, so as we free our mind in that sense, all manner of guidance from beyond space and time that could help us with any of the levels that we think we need to work with become available to us, and guides step in, because this is the brotherhood. These are likewise the mighty companions. We talk about mighty companions, and I know there are organizations that recognize and validate the reality of the self by utilizing the term mighty companions to talk about who they are with here in space and time. But I want you to remember and know this from me. While there are many lessons that we can learn, when we learn to trust in ourselves and trust in the mighty companions we are with here in space and time, when we learn to trust in the guidance that comes from the mighty companions who always want us to return, who are always urging us to return, we begin to get an out-of-time help that's not available here within space and time, and yet is utilizable as we utilize these lessons. And as we utilize the lessons, we learn to trust that which is out of time. Do you understand that's what we need to return to? Trusting that which is out of time as not being there to harm us, not being aliens, but being the loving brothers who are as we are in reality. But as we have separated ourselves here because of a failure to laugh in a tiny mad idea, failure to remember to laugh. So we have concretized and reduced ourselves to thinking that we're these bodies in space and time that need to make decisions. Okay, many of you, when you begin to have these experiences of knowing you're not that, we're learning to energize the decisions that the bodies seem to be making in order to bring about a change in the level and trust of the guidance and the availability of that which is beyond space and time, here within space and time, at a vibratory frequency of energy, wherein which changes can be made and are made into your experience. Sometimes they're not recognizable, but when you learn to trust yourself, because you've trusted the voice for God, these first couple lines of this lesson are going to make perfect sense to you. The glory of my Father is my own. Let not the truth about ourselves today be hidden by a false humility. No, it's not a false humility that we're seeking. It's a humility that shines in your light, your eyes, and in your face, that allows you to be here in space and time with a certainty of who you are, not because you're in an association in space and time that validates an identity, but because you're in a true association with your reality, which you're being recognized because of the trust you make, the decisions you make with the trust you're given here in that which is beyond space and time. By trusting, when you're given a direction, you say yes. And then in a situation, you remember the direction that you were given, and as it generalizes, you'll see how you change and how the world changes. Not so much how the world changes, but how the changed mind that you have allows you to participate in a world that changes along with your change, so that it keeps pace. Remember how Jesus says, if we looked at it this way, the body has an idea of an individual person, and the totality of space and time, the world, let's say, as the symbolic representation of the sonship or Christ out beyond space and time. So let's just say this: when we utilize this alone, we change here within this. When we utilize with our brothers here in space and time, we change with them. But when we utilize it with our brothers beyond space and time, and then brothers who are utilizing beyond space and time begin to cooperate here in ventures that are given to us and we're inspired by the Spirit, one of the things that begins to happen is your life begins a fluidity wherein you know that what you're experiencing and what you're being given is not because of anything in space and time, because it's in direct relationship with who you're working with and what you're working with beyond space and time. This is a little bit a law of attraction, if you want to say. But that's the truth, because you've eliminated time in your mind, so you no longer need what a person who's living in space and time would need in order to survive, because you're no longer utilizing space and time for survival. You're utilizing space and time to learn lessons that are eternal, so that the next phase in your own learning is beyond perception and beyond space and time, without the necessity for repetition of any of this. Okay? Because the most you're ever going to do in space and time is what everybody else in space and time has already done. It may appear to look different. Okay. But Jesus, now look what Jesus has done. He says, greater things will you do than I. So the glory of our Father is my own, and it's not a glory that comes in a spatial temporal relationship of power over something in space and time, wherein which you're glorified by a constituency like Caesar or Attila the Hun or kingships and bureaucracies and all that kind of stuff. It's not that type of glory but there's echoes of that. There's echoes of true glory in it, because there's echo when it becomes equal and we're all celebrating for a single purpose. The glory of God has no opposition to it. It's the glory of God the glory of God is more like the glory when you're in a direct moment of communication with a grain of sand or a sunflower. It's a glory beyond space and time that can't be expressed here. And although it's attempted to be duplicated, it always pales in regard to the actual experience that you have. And that's the humility that this is talking about. And the false humility is thinking that you're going to be glorified. And you just don't need it because you're beyond it. That's the false humility that we're talking about. Let us instead be thankful for gifts our Father gave us. That's what I was talking about. How would you know? How could you know the gifts that your Father gave you and gives you unless you empty yourself of all that you have given yourself and made yourself in an attempt to survive until death? Give up the world, in other words. We're operating from a sense of, to gain true perception, you must give up the world, because you must come in right relationship with everything. And right relationship with everything, as we've done in these past few lessons, the rest of this involves coming into a now moment, not the past, not tomorrow, but right here and right now, today. Now I am your son. Today I am your son. Now, in this instant, it's always right now. You're letting go of the past. That's gone. There's no sense of a future to be glorified in. There is only now, in which we're coming into a direct contact with something that's beyond the illusion that we may be utilizing to talk about it with. You see how gently that fades away? See how easily that can fade away from your awareness, and then you're into a true awareness of a true self, and not as a true perspective. You notice that has no use, really, now. And yet, it comes with a change of mind and heart. That now is part of your conscious, what you're consciously aware of. Not unconscious. Yourself is no longer unconscious. It's been made aware of you in this condition of consciousness. You've consciously become aware of a self that's not in this world or of this world, and does not live and was not born the way any of this operates, and now you become responsible for that self and this as well. And now you step back and make decisions from that self for the disillusionment of this, so that you can live in the glory of that relationship without having to deal with this, because the trustworthy nature of the pursuit that you've been following is offering you a now moment, not of accumulation for glory somewhere else, like a statue, but in right here and living in that living, loving light. I think we're going to get to that if I ever read it. Can we see in those whom he shares his glory any trace of sin or guilt? Of course not. You want to know why? Every situation in space and time is exactly the same as any other situation in space and time. Okay? And the power behind the situation in space and time, which is the glory of the power of the Son of God, who may be separate for the second verse instant, is the exact same as it is even in the moments of recognition. Nothing changes except the loss of the ability, the loss of the ability for guilt and fear to give you a false indication of what you know your brother is, beyond the illusion that he perceives about himself or you perceive about yourself, because you're recognizing the truth of who we are. It's like it's like an awakened mind recognizes the awakened mind in your brother beyond the foibles of what seems to be occurring in the relationship in the world of space and time. And you'll find that there's even a difference in the way the communication comes from the awakened mind to the brother who he recognizes beyond the illusion. And the responses can be anything. Because someone who's hell-bent on living a life of illusion doesn't want to be transparent and be seen. He's still defending himself and attempting to perfect which isn't perfectible, an illusion, an image. So in any moment, the sinner and the saint have the same light beyond, so it would make no difference, because that's the light. All of it is false. None of it's true. And can it be that we are not among them? His glory, any trace of sin again, can it be that we're not among? Of course not. We're right here. We're all together. When he loves his Son forever, the perfect constancy, knowing he is as he created him. We thank you, Father, for the light that shines forever in us. Shines forever in us equally. Some become aware of it, and then they are different. They have recognized that there's a difference. They're different to themselves. They're different to the world that doesn't recognize them. And now they're different to those who are likewise different to themselves, because there's a recognition beyond the illusion of an equality and a willingness to say yes and enter into, not because of anything in space and time, not for any space-time benefit. Although, if as above, so below, as within, so without, we tend to lead life more and more by grace, let's say. I don't like to talk about abundance in worldly terms, because then people begin to get skewed. In the skewedness, it doesn't work, and then you think something's gone wrong and you judge yourself. But as this perfects itself, you'll see that the entirety of the system is foolproof. It's idiot-proof. I think Jesus said that, of course. And we honor it because you share it with us. We are one, united in this light, and one with you, at peace with all creation and ourselves, because all creation and ourselves are created from this. It's all one thing. It's all one thing, and you're not trying to figure out what that one thing is. It's not anything different from what you are. And we're seeing each other beyond the illusions, wells of illusions. You come looking at myself. I'm looking at myself, in a box, and I'm knowing that this can't possibly be real. And yet I'm utilizing it from a perspective that's beyond it to offer you the same perspective. Now, how far you're willing to go is your decision. I'm telling you, at some point in time, we're operating, remember, under the auspices of salvation. We all did, we either will or did or are making the decision for salvation. And since the salvation is the recognition of the one mind that is a priori to the idea of separation, and that one mind is the one mind that has no opposition because it is the totality of the reality, which we are one, united in light. And then we are all operating with the same power, and there'd be nothing to fear. And that's what we're coming to the conclusion of. Nothing here can harm us because there's nothing here. We're just playing our part. And as we learn to play our part based on the part as it's written and orchestrated by God through Jesus, the grace of God and the grace of our brothers comes forth in spite of the situation. And we laugh at each other's foibles, knowing that that's not who we really are. Recognizing there's no triumph over our brother, there's only a triumph within our heart and mind of the creative spirit of the nature of the truth of who we are, given to us all by our Father.